Democrats failing to get enough Republican moderates to break ranks.
It's a grand tragedy.
Despite new reported bombshells from John Bolton's book, the stage now set for a final vote to acquit the president. When it could come.
Public health emergency, the U.S. making the declaration over the coronavirus outbreak. U.S. airlines suspending flights to mainland China and a mandatory quarantine for a plane load of evacuated Americans. The first move of its kind in more than 50 years.
Caught on camera, state lawmaker arrest the moment this elected official was hauled into a police car after police give her a sobriety test. The unusual charge she's facing this morning.
Powerful tributes.
Amazing grace.
The emotional night at the Staples Center as the Lakers return to their home court for the first time since Kobe Bryant's tragic death.
I look at this as a celebration tonight.
The honors for a legend.
And party time. Super Bowl celebrations underway. Star-studded events kicking off the big weekend. But stormy weather puts a damper on Harry Styles' plans minutes before showtime. Will the weather cooperate for the big game?
Live from ABC News in New York, this is Good Morning America.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. We're going to begin here with a crucial vote in the impeachment trial of President Donald J. Trump. The Senate blocking the call for witnesses to testify, creating a historic precedent and clearing the way for the president to be acquitted.
Senators working into the night to schedule how this trial will be concluded. They will take the weekend off before reconvening Monday morning.
Now, the vote to acquit the president won't come until Wednesday after both the Iowa caucuses on Monday and the State of the Union address on Tuesday. ABC's David Wright is in West Palm Beach following the president this weekend. David, good morning to you.
Good morning, Whit. Technically, the impeachment trial will now go into next week, but the result is pretty much a foregone conclusion after the Democrats lost last night's crucial vote to bolster their case with additional witnesses.
Ms. Murkowski, no.
That one vote from Alaska's Lisa Murkowski gutted any last hope among Democrats of calling witnesses. Final tally, 51-49 against.
It's a grand tragedy, one of the worst tragedies that the Senate has ever overcome.
Democrats had pinned their hopes on these four Republican moderates, but only two of them ended up breaking ranks, Susan Collins of Maine and Mitt Romney of Utah.
Mr. Romney, aye.
Earlier in the day, Lamar Alexander of Tennessee made it clear he did not favor calling witnesses like John Bolton, the former national security advisor who, according to the New York Times, writes in his unpublished book that Trump told him back in May that he was withholding military aid to pressure Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. Alexander said there is no need for more evidence to prove something that has already been proven, adding that he believed what the president did was inappropriate, but not impeachable. In theory, that left open the possibility of a tie on the issue until Murkowski's vote. She wouldn't say whether she thought the president did anything wrong, but she said Congress had failed because the process was tainted by partisanship from start to finish. Quote, "I have come to the conclusion that there will be no fair trial in the Senate. I don't believe the continuation of this process will change anything."
Mr. Chief Justice, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
The Democratic leader will state the inquiry.
To satisfy curiosity, Democratic leader Chuck Schumer asked Chief Justice John Roberts if he would have been willing to break a tie, as his predecessor did more than once in the trial of President Andrew Johnson. Roberts said no, he wouldn't.
I think it would be inappropriate for me, an unelected official from a different branch of government, to assert the power to change that result so that the motion would succeed.
So at this point, here's where things stand. The trial has recessed for the weekend. Closing arguments resume Monday. Final vote on the verdict scheduled for Wednesday. That means that the president will not be able to boast of his acquittal at the State of the Union address on Tuesday night. Instead, he becomes the second president in U.S. history to deliver the State of the Union under the cloud of impeachment. The previous person, of course, Bill Clinton. Eva?
All right, David Wright for us. Well, several Democratic candidates have been kept off the campaign trail because of the impeachment trial, and now they have just 2 more days to woo voters in Iowa before the nation's first caucus kicks off election season. ABC's Rachel Scott is in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, with this last big push. Good morning to you, Rachel.
Eva, good morning. The senators in this race will be working overtime this weekend, trying to make up for precious lost days campaigning. This is crunch time. We are 2 days out from the first vote, and it's still anybody's race. Senator Elizabeth Warren wasting no time, racing from Capitol Hill to Iowa, surprising a crowd overnight.
Hello, Des Moines! I heard there were some people who wanted to do some selfies!
As Senator Bernie Sanders' campaign rallied supporters with a concert. With the weekend off from the impeachment trial, the senators running for president scrambling back to the trail 2 days out from the first vote. Their rivals have spent most of their time campaigning here, flooding every corner of the state. Former Vice President Joe Biden on a 20-city, 17-county bus tour. Vice President, have you benefited from having the state largely to yourself during this critical stretch?
All I know is it's been feeling good for a long time here, and it still feels good, and we're going to keep moving.
And Mayor Pete Buttigieg traveling nearly 700 miles in a swing across Iowa. Buttigieg slipping in the polls, now stepping up his attacks on his rivals who are pushing ahead.
Senator Sanders is offering an approach that suggests that we either have to choose between a revolution or the status quo.
But in the fight to defeat President Trump, Democratic voters are torn over the direction of the party and which candidate can take it over the finish line.
You can elect the safe choice, but I think in order to really fix a broken system, electing somebody like Elizabeth is the only way to get it done.
The Democrats need to nominate somebody that's more centrist, and I'm afraid that if we go any other direction, that we're going to lose.
And another shakeup in this race, a rule change could allow Michael Bloomberg to get on the debate stage later this month in Nevada. The DNC dropping the donor threshold, opening up the door for the billionaire mayor who is self-funding his campaign to potentially qualify. Eva?
All right, Rachel for us. And tune in Monday for our live coverage of the results of the Iowa caucuses right here on ABC.
So much going on, so much to talk about this morning. We are, as we've been saying, in the home stretch in both Iowa and, of course, in the impeachment trial. So let's bring in ABC News chief political analyst Matthew Dow, joining us from Texas this morning, and right here in the studio, NYU law professor Melissa Murray. Melissa, let me start with you. In the Senate trial, legally, is this a done deal, or are there potentially any twists that could come at the end to derail the march toward acquittal?
I think it would take an absolute political tornado to derail this. This train is pulling into the station. The president is likely to be acquitted, as it were, on Wednesday with that vote.
Well, let me turn to you with this, Matt. Assuming that Melissa's right, that the president is likely to be acquitted next week, politically, are there winners and losers here?
Well, so broadly, I think one of the big losers is the constitutional system of checks and balances. The founders envisioned a president who might push their power too far, but they never envisioned a Senate abdicating the responsibility to hold that president in check. And it's sort of give it a football analogy on the winners and losers, since it's on Super Bowl weekend, is the Republicans won in the short term, but it's a little bit like winning a football game but losing a bunch of players to injury, because I think in the end, in the long term, what this could really do is hurt those people running for office for the Senate and possibly the president in the long term going to November. So I think it's a mixed bag on this, but definitely I think our system of checks and balances suffered during this time.
Melissa, there are some people on the left who have worried aloud that an acquittal is going to give a green light to the president to go and solicit further interference by foreign governments in our elections. Do you share that concern?
Well, I think it's a very real concern, certainly since one of the president's defenders, Professor Alan Dershowitz of Harvard Law School, suggested that anything that the president did in anticipation of his reelection or in furtherance of his reelection was actually okay. That's a stunning statement that I think most constitutional law scholars would take objection with.
And what about this vote that we saw late yesterday to bar witnesses? Does that set a precedent going forward?
Well, we've had so few presidential impeachments in our history that everything that happens in one necessarily impacts the subsequent ones that happen. And so the fact that we, for the first time, have had an impeachment of a president without witnesses will surely set a bar for the future and will allow presidents to stonewall on the question of witnesses.
Matt, let me go back to you for more on the political aspects here. We're heading, as you know, into Iowa. Is the impeachment trial likely to cast a large shadow, or are the voters and candidates likely to ignore it?
Well, we're in such a disruptive moment. We're in such a unique time that we've never had an impeachment of a president going into his reelection. We've never had that before in our history, and obviously we've never had before on Iowa at a caucus in the midst of an impeachment time. To me, what it's likely to do is bolster the people making the argument of electability going into Iowa. Now, anything can happen. We've seen it happen before. But if I were betting on a candidate, I would bet on the candidate where voters think they're the most electable, because I think at this point in time, for Democratic voters, they've put a premium on who can beat Donald Trump in the general election. And for that point, right now, Joe Biden leads on that score. So I think electability is going to be the key on caucus night on Monday.
What's that old Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times? We certainly are. Matthew and Melissa, our dream team, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And a reminder, we will have live coverage of the Senate impeachment trial when it resumes at 11 Eastern Monday morning right here on ABC. And another big reminder while I have you, we do have exciting news regarding the future of ABC News. With today's extraordinary news cycle, which we've been talking about, the timing is truly perfect for the new ABC News Live, streaming everywhere. Breaking news, context, analysis, digging deeper, making sense of all of the news. ABC News Live launches Monday night, February 3rd, caucus night. Whit, over to you.
A busy week ahead, that's for sure, Dan. Thank you. The White House has added 6 more countries to the list of the nations facing travel bans to the U.S. President Trump signed an order on Friday to impose restrictions on travelers from Nigeria, Burma, Kyrgyzstan, and Eritrea. Citizens from Sudan and Tanzania are banned from the diversity visa lottery, but can still apply for other visas. This now brings the total number of countries on the restricted travel list to 13. The restrictions are set to take effect on February 22nd.
Well, a woman is under arrest after a security breach in Mar-a-Lago just hours before the president was set to arrive. Police say 30-year-old Hannah Romehill drove a black SUV through 2 of Mar-a-Lago's security checkpoints. A Secret Service and sheriff's deputies opened fire, hitting that vehicle, but she sped off. Police later found her bullet-riddled SUV at this West Palm Beach motel, tackling her as she attempted to flee. Fortunately, no one was hurt.
Okay, we want to turn now to another big and developing story this morning, the latest in the coronavirus outbreak. The U.S. government has declared a public health emergency as a new case is confirmed, and the president restricts entry of foreign nationals, and American citizens are quarantined for the first time in a half-century. ABC's Adrian Bankert right there in Moreno Valley, California, with much more. Adrian, good morning to you.
Good morning, Dan. Good to be with you. Yes, we're here at that military base where those quarantined Americans will call home for the next couple of weeks. And you talked about it. This is such a rare move. The U.S. hasn't declared an order like this in decades.
This morning, the U.S. declaring a public health emergency as global fears of the coronavirus intensify.
It is likely that we will continue to see more cases in the United States in the coming days and weeks, including some limited person-to-person transmission.
Beginning tomorrow, the U.S. will temporarily ban foreign travelers who have been to China within the last 14 days, restricting flights from the country, rerouting them through just 7 U.S. airports to screen passengers for the virus.
These prudent, targeted, and temporary actions will ensure resources are focused on the health and safety of the American people.
And now United, American, and Delta are suspending flights to and from China.
I was like, well, I better just come back earlier because I don't know when I can come back. They check everybody's temperature and make sure you're not having fever.
This morning, Chinese officials report coronavirus cases have risen with nearly 12,000 patients and at least 259 reported deaths. Many in China fleeing the country. ABC's Ian Panel is in Hong Kong.
Despite growing restrictions on travelers from China, this railway station leads directly to the border and people are still able to cross. There's now growing pressure on the government to seal it off.
In the U.S., the CDC has announced another new case in California, bringing the total number of diagnosed patients here to 7. That's while nearly 200 Americans are on lockdown at this California airbase. The CDC ordering a 2-week quarantine for those travelers who evacuated from the center of the outbreak in Wuhan earlier this week on a State Department charter plane.
We were all in awe and shocked, because of course we want to all go home to our parents or family members, but we all are pretty much understand the reasoning behind this.
And fears of economic impact from coronavirus led to a big sell-off across the board on Wall Street Friday, the Dow tumbling more than 600 points, its worst day since August.
And important to remember, officials are also stressing that while we will see more cases here in the States, it's extremely difficult to contract the virus in America. Still look for those symptoms of fever and heavy coughing. Whit, over to you.
All right, Adrian Bankert for us in California. Thank you. We want to bring in our ABC News chief medical correspondent, Dr. Jen Ashton, joining us from Newton, Massachusetts. Dr. Jen, thank you so much for joining us. Yesterday, we saw a quarantine, another case in the U.S. What's the significance of this?
Well, first, Whit, if you talk about the quarantine and travel restrictions, those are natural inclinations in the case of a virus or an outbreak like this on the part of government to safeguard public health. It is about containment. So that's what you're seeing there. And yes, the first quarantine in 50 years in the United States. In terms of number of cases, I think people should be less focused on 6, 7, 8. We expect to see more in the country, and more focused on the number of people being tested, both here and in China and other countries, because this is a virus that we know now can spread when patients or people have no symptoms. So there are likely many, many people who have been infected that are just showing no symptoms and have a very mild course of the disease. It makes it harder to contain.
And that spread from person to person, part of the big concern here. And one of the challenges, Dr. Jen, with detecting the coronavirus is that the signs and symptoms can be similar to the flu.
Exactly. So fever, cough, shortness of breath, some chills, body aches, in some reports, some GI symptoms. The key, Whit, is recent travel history or recent contact, close contact with someone who's been in China. But again, with this situation, so much fear, so much anxiety on the part of the public, which is understandable. In medicine and science, we have to reiterate, we have to act based on fact, not fear, evidence, and not emotion. But this is an evolving situation.
And that's why we appreciate having you on the show for us. Dr. Jen, as always, thank you. Dan?
Thanks,
yeah,
Whit.
time of fear. It's nice to have a calm voice.
Exactly.
Like, Dr.
Walking
Jen,
us through it.
thank you. Let's check the weather. Speaking of calming voices, yes. Robert Marciano is here with some rough weather hitting Florida.
Yeah, let's not forget facts. I'm full of facts.
Yeah, that too.
Yes. Fear not the facts, my friends. Good to see you guys. I hope you're having a great start to the month of February. It was a rough go in South Florida. Check out some of this video if you could. Miami, where they're having the Super Bowl, really got pounded last night with some heavy rain, flash flooding there. Some of the concerts running into some issues, just people trying to get around. Yeah, high heels, the South Beach pumps, not the best way to get around 2.5 inches of rainfall that falls in a short period of time. All right, we have got another threat for severe weather across that same area today. This front kind of draping across. Right now it's Fort Myers over to Fort Pierce is where most of the rainfall is. But later on this afternoon, we could see another batch of severe weather, damaging winds, hail, brief tornado, maybe some more flash flooding. But then it does clear out for the Super Bowl. All right, atmospheric river in the Pacific Northwest. These popcorn clouds out here in the Pacific. That's the cold air. Out ahead of it, warm air, high snow levels, flash flooding probably. Some wind alerts. Could see some high winds from San Francisco down to San Diego tomorrow night into Monday night. And then this storm does go coast to coast with a severe weather threat next week. Talk more about that in a second. For now, though, it's time now for a look at your local forecast.
Hello and welcome to February. Yes, we have some nicer conditions as we get into the weekend. We do have an additional chance for showers today and some added clouds. So not the best start on your Saturday. 48 degrees. Best chance for rain today between around 4 and 9 o'clock. Now we will have some afternoon sunshine on your Sunday. Slightly milder, 50 degrees. Looking ahead to early next week, 63 degrees near record highs on your Monday. Better chances for rain, but still mild Tuesday and Wednesday.
Bowl. So I like the Chiefs because of that. They're used to playing in the cold weather. The temperature's in the 60s.
Nothing's really chilly in Miami.
No.
Niners are going to win. Just saying.
All right, bud.
Patriots still have a chance, or is that
not this year?
Okay.
But you did win fantasy football.
You did win fantasy football. Once again, thank you for the reminder on that. Shifting gears, speaking of football, by the way, Super Bowl weekend underway, and before the big game, of course, there's plenty of partying going on. But as we just saw, severe weather, Rob was talking about it, in Miami overnight, ended up disrupting plans for some of the celebrity-filled events. ABC's TJ Holmes is live from Miami with more on that. TJ, good morning.